Zhao An, and welcome. My name is Pat Boland, and I'm the Digital Economy Officer at the American Institute in Taiwan. Welcome to the Global Cooperation in Training Frameworks Virtual Engagement Series for Latin America and the Caribbean. Founded in 2015, the GCTF is a multilateral platform established by Taiwan, the US, and now with Japan to share Taiwan's best practices and problem-solving abilities with partners around the globe. Taiwan's frequent exclusion from international bodies has largely deprived the world of its humanitarian assistance, technical know-how, and rich experience as a democratic success story. Through the GCTF, we can learn from Taiwan and share its experience with partners around the world. Indeed, Taiwan has world-class experts in a wide variety of fields, including women's empowerment, disaster relief, digital economy and cybersecurity, media literacy, and public health. So today, as the world faces the COVID-19 pandemic, we're honored to discuss COVID-19 and the digital economy. This webinar is a historic event. It's the first time we are holding an activity under the GCTF framework aimed at helping Taiwan share its experience with countries in the Western Hemisphere. While COVID-19 has precluded us from visiting each other in person, we're very happy to be connected online today to conduct today's virtual meeting. And as soon as public health conditions allow, we'll be very excited to conduct this GCTF in person in Latin America. So before we start, I'd like to share a couple webinar guidelines for your awareness. First, please turn off your microphone during the opening remarks and the expert presentations. This will help keep our communications clear and prevent echoes and distortion. Second, please use the WebEx interface to write down your ideas and questions. We'll do our best to incorporate your questions and suggestions during the question and answer session after the presentations. We welcome you all to provide your insightful perspective and questions to the speakers. Last but not least, let's warmly welcome our VIPs from around the world to inaugurate today's event. First, we'll hear from Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Julie Chung from the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs at the U.S. Department of State.
Buenos días. Es un honor estar con ustedes para el primer seminario de una serie virtual de Taller Foro Global de Cooperación y Capacitación o GCTF. GCTF es el preeminente foro de colaboración entre los Estados Unidos, Taiwán, la Asociación de Intercambio de Japón y Taiwán y otros socios que comparten nuestros valores democráticos. Es la primera vez que traemos este evento al pueblo latinoamericano y estamos emocionados de asociarnos con ustedes en las prioridades de la economía digital. El tema del primer seminario es un tema que nos afecta a todos. ¿Cómo mejor utilizar las herramientas digitales disponibles para responder a la pandemia COVID-19? Nuestro enfoque será opciones para la inserción de América Latina y el Caribe en las cadenas de suministro de producción de alta tecnología. Estoy muy emocionada de escuchar y aprender del ministro de Economía Digital de Taiwán, un experto técnico de Japón y el director ejecutivo de la empresa Blue Dot, una empresa canadiense utilizando la inteligencia artificial para mejorar la salud pública. Los Estados Unidos, Taiwán y la Asociación de Intercambio de Japón y Taiwán estamos todos con ustedes que luchan contra el coronavirus. Quiero especialmente darle gracias al personal de atención médica y los trabajadores en la primera línea de la pandemia. No estaríamos aquí sin su apoyo. Mientras pasemos por un periodo de transición entre la pandemia y la recuperación y el crecimiento económico, necesitamos a nuestros amigos y socios como Taiwán y Japón más que nunca. Durante los meses que vienen, los Estados Unidos, Taiwán y la Asociación de Intercambio de Japón y Taiwán estaremos colaborando con Latinoamérica y el Caribe en una serie de seminarios virtuales a intercambios sobre la economía digital, arraigados en nuestros valores democráticos, compartidos y nuestro interés común en la prosperidad y la transparencia en la región. Nuestro objetivo a largo plazo es realizar un evento presencial en Guatemala cuando las condiciones de salud pública lo permitan. Los Estados Unidos apoyan las relaciones entre Taiwán y sus nuevos socios diplomáticos en nuestro hemisferio, así como las relaciones económicas y culturales que Taiwán mantiene con toda la región, porque Taiwán está comprometido con la democracia regional y con el desarrollo sostenible. Alentamos a los países que aún no han abierto una oficina de representación comercial y cultural de Taiwán a que lo hagan para beneficiarse de la experticia especializada de Taiwán. Estoy segura de que esta actividad será una contribución fundamental al desarrollo económico de nuestros países y espero trabajar con todos ustedes en futuros eventos de esta serie. Gracias.
Thank you. Now we will welcome the Foreign Minister of Guatemala, Pedro Brolo.
It is a great honor for me to address you in the first virtual seminar of Global Cooperation and Training Framework aimed at entrepreneurs and public officials in Latin America and the Caribbean. I am grateful to the Republic of China, Taiwan, the United States of America, and Japan for this valuable initiative that will allow us to discuss the change that the COVID-19 pandemic has placed in front of us and how it has impacted in a way we've never seen before in the evolution of the digital economy. The post-pandemic era will require to all of us new capabilities and expertise. For this reason, this global cooperation and training framework is important. All aspects of our lives have been affected by COVID-19 pandemic. This is not just a health crisis, it is a multidimensional problem that will drastically change the way we interact, do business, learn, work, and think about the future. Its impact on the world economy today is still immeasurable, from a decrease in consumer spending, the dramatic decline in international tourism, to the paralysis of business activities, including investment and new jobs, reducing everything to the essential. In the concept of global economy, all market sectors are changing. In that sense, business and all kinds of entrepreneurships are looking to technology to be agile in the face of disruption and create new digitally enabled business models for the new normality. It is very valuable time to global solidarity. These international virtual forums are gaining importance, confirming the value of knowledge transfer, innovation, exchange of experiences, and professionalization adapted to the new demands of the world's market. Prior to COVID-19, the world was undergoing massive business transformation represented by stunning success, scale, internet business that are now an integral part of our lives and exemplify the new global digital economy. The digital economy is definitely a topic worth addressing. For this reason and more, it is a great honor for the government of Guatemala that our country has been chosen to host the first forum in Latin America. So from now on, I wish to achieve the desired success.
Now we'll welcome Taiwan's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Miguel Cao.
Hola a todos. Es para mí un honor de representar nuevamente al Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores de la República China Taiwán para darles la bienvenida a la primera edición en línea de la Conferencia Internacional en la región de Latinoamérica y Caribe del Marco Global de Cooperación y Formación, GCTF, siglas en inglés. El evento de hoy es el fruto del esfuerzo concertado de todas las partes después de que la Cancillería de Taiwán anunciara el mes de julio la celebración del evento en cuestión junto con los Estados Unidos, Japón y Guatemala como anfitrión. Ese año, el COVID-19 ha provocado una pandemia mundial que sigue golpeando con fuerza Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Desde los inicios del brote, Taiwán, como miembro responsable de la comunidad internacional, se ha entregado de lleno y proactivamente en la cooperación internacional de la prevención epidémica mostrando a los aliados diplomáticos y países amigos el espíritu solidario de Taiwán de sobreponerse juntos a las adversidades. Aparte de proveer inmediatamente a los países con materiales para la prevención epidémica, Taiwán también compartió su experiencia en la lucha contra el coronavirus con los países aliados y las organizaciones regionales, con el fin de trabajar mancomunadamente con todo el mundo para superar estos momentos de dificultad. El COVID-19 no solo ha provocado una crisis mundial en la salud pública y la atención médica, sino que también ha impactado gravemente en la economía y el desarrollo social de los países en el mundo, obligando a los gobiernos a afrontar severos desafíos. Taiwán ha podido controlar el posible impacto de coronavirus gracias a las medidas preventivas adecuadas, logrado el reconocimiento internacional. Por tanto, muchos gobiernos han emulado nuestra práctica exitosa como referencias para promover su política de desarrollo nacional. En respuesta a las expectativas de los países para este primer seminario en línea en la región de Latinoamérica y el Caribe del GCTF, titulado El COVID-19 y la economía digital. Hemos invitado a expertos internacionales a compartir su experiencia en diferentes campos. Ello permitirá que al enfrentarse a la epidemia, todos los gobiernos puedan planificar políticas de actuación innovadora, avanzando así hacia una nueva era de desarrollo nacional. Quisiera aprovechar la ocasión para reiterar en nombre del Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores de la República China Taiwán nuestras gratitudes a los Estados Unidos, Japón, Canadá y los aliados diplomáticos y países de ideas afines por su firme apoyo a la instancia de Taiwán de participar en la Organización Mundial de la Salud. Taiwán seguirá demostrando a la comunidad internacional, mediante acciones concretas, que el mundo necesita a Taiwán, puesto que Taiwán puede ayudar y Taiwán está ayudando. Para finalizar, agradezco una vez más la entusiasta participación de todos los presentes y auguro grandes éxitos a este evento en el deseo de que redunde en beneficio de todos los participantes. Muchas gracias.
And last but not least, let us welcome Chief Representative Hiroyasu Izumi from the Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association's Taipei office.
Distinguished guests, on behalf of the Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association, we would like to extend a warm welcome to you. We are delighted to co-host the GCTF virtual workshop on COVID-19 and the digital economy with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Taiwan, the American Institute in Taiwan, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala participates in this webinar as the first hosting partner from Latin American countries. It is our great pleasure to have a new partner join our webinar. The GCTF was launched by Taiwan and the United States in 2015, followed by the Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association as a full partner in 2019. We are in high hopes that more and more countries will join the GCTF in the future. The pandemic of COVID-19 has a significant influence on our society and the lifestyle we have built up so far. In the post-COVID-19 world, information technology will unquestionably play an even greater role in our future society, along with the introduction of the teleworking, remote education, drones, and artificial intelligence. The digital economy created by IT has important implications, especially in regions like Latin America, where there is considerable room for the further development of the latest IT infrastructure. On the other hand, since IT is very closely related to our privacy and democratic system, it is highly essential to build up an open and transparent system to avoid the domination of information by specific groups or individuals. Amid the COVID-19 outbreak, Taiwan has successfully utilized IT to control the virus while ensuring transparency. We believe that this Taiwan model will serve as a good example for the international community. Today's webinar has very significant implications, where experts from all over the world, including Japan, Taiwan, the United States, and Guatemala, discuss the future of digital economy. We will continue to fully support this meaningful effort. Last but not least, we would like to appreciate everyone for your efforts and commitments in organizing today's GCTF virtual workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable guests, for your warm welcome. En especial, bienvenidos a todos de nuestros amigos de Latin America who join us here today. Before we get into the next session, let's recap with the GCTF 5-year anniversary video, which will help introduce the GCTF to our friends in the Western Hemisphere.
I'm Congressman Ami Bera. I'm chairman of the Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific for the United States House of Representatives. On behalf of the United States and Taiwan, we should celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Taiwan-U.S. Global Cooperation and Training Framework. This is an important framework that highlights the strength of the friendship and relationship between these two great countries. It also is a partnership that highlights Taiwan's strength in women's empowerment, healthcare, technology. Working together through the framework, we can solve the world's challenges, especially as we live in this time of a global pandemic. Let's celebrate this, and congratulations to the United States and Taiwan. Be well.
Hey everybody, this is Congressman Ted Yoho, and I want to give a shout out to my friends at AIT. This is the 5th anniversary of the GCTF, the Global Cooperation and Training Framework. You guys do so much around the world to promote the democracies that have made the world stable. In Taiwan, you guys are leaders of this, and we appreciate your efforts. Keep up the great work and look forward to seeing you. Take care.
GCTF の皆さんこんにちは。日本の衆議院議員の大野啓太郎と申します。本日はGCTF の5周年にあたる年になるんだと思いますけれども、心からお喜びを申し上げたいと思います。そしてこの過去の5年間の GCTF の取り組みに心から敬意を表させていただきたいと思います。いろんな分野議論されてこられたと思いますけれども、これからも日本並びにそのアメリカ台湾で力を合わせて新しい分野にも積極的に取り組んでいければいいかなと思いますので、これからもどうぞ頑張ってください。おめでとうございました。
Now, before we get into the speaker's presentation, allow me to reiterate the webinar guidelines for your awareness. Please turn off your microphone during the opening remarks and the expert presentations. This will help keep communications clear and prevent echoes and distortion. Second, please use the WebEx interface to type in your ideas and questions. We'll incorporate your questions and suggestions in the question and answer session after our experts present. Today's first speaker is Taiwan's Digital Minister, Audrey Tang. As one of the world's top open source software developers, Audrey started her own IT company at the age of 19. In 2014, she became a digital advisor to Apple, where she was involved in high-level artificial intelligence projects. And as digital minister, Audrey helps develop digital tools that connect citizens with government officials in a bottom-up approach to policymaking. In combating against COVID-19, Audrey has helped Taiwan harness digital platforms to help the public keep updated about medical supply availability and to monitor the status of quarantining citizens. Without further ado, let's welcome Audrey Tang.
Hello, everyone. Good local time, everyone. I'm really happy to be here to share you virtually for the next 20 minutes Taiwan's playbook, what we call the Taiwan model of digital social innovation for the twin challenges of the pandemic, which we fought without a lockdown, and the infodemic, which we fought without a takedown. In the 3 pillars of digital innovation in Taiwan, it's very easy to remember. It's called fast, fair, and fun. Using digital technologies, we have been able to work with the civic tech community, for example, on this Taiwanese equivalent of Reddit called the PTT, where last December, when Dr. Li Wenliang from Wuhan shared on their social media that there's, and I quote, 7 new SARS cases, unquote, in the Huanan seafood market, it gets reposted and upvoted immediately on the PTT. And our medical officers noticed it immediately and started health inspection for flight passengers from Wuhan the very next day, the first day of 2020. And we also set up the Central Epidemic Command Center, or the CECC, before we had the first locally confirmed case. And the toll-free number 1922 really played a very large role here. This is not just a toll-free number that you can dial and a human being with very empathetic tone will listen to all your questions about epidemiology, but it's also a way to crowdsource social innovations and new ideas. For example, back in April, there was a young boy that called that said, oh, I don't want to go to school anymore because you're rationing out masks. And all I had is pink medical mask because he doesn't get to choose the color. And then he said that my classmates may laugh at me. Well, the very next day in our daily live stream press conference of the CECC, all the medical officers, including Commander Chen Shizhong, our health minister, wore pink medical mask. And suddenly the boy became the most hip boy in the class because only he has the color that the heroes wear. And so by making essentially the epidemiologists and medical officers rock stars that interacts daily with the civil society, it shows a radical trust from the government to the citizens. As I mentioned about mask rationing, this is not just an effort top down by the government, it's with the people and with the advent of the civic technologist. In late January, there was a young civic technologist named Wu Zhangwei, Howard Wu in Tainan City, who developed this map so that everybody can report which store in Taiwan still have masks available. But instead of relying on crowdsourcing alone, I take notice to this work and present it to our Prime Minister, who then Premier Su Zhenchang said, oh, we should trust citizens with open data. Because in Taiwan, we have a single-payer national health insurance system that covers more than 99% of citizens and also residents. We're able then to work with 6,000 or so professional pharmacists all across the island, more than 100 tools provided by the civic technologists so that people queuing in line in a certain pharmacy can actually witness that people queuing before them, nowadays it's 9 medical masks per 2 weeks if you're an adult and 10 if you are a child. After they make a purchase, this number will become 49 in just a couple of minutes. And so it's participatory accountability through something like a distributed ledger. And so this builds trust from people to people without people having to blindly trust the governance number, which would be what happens if we publish the number every day instead of every 30 seconds. And it also enabled the civil society to build real-time dashboards to show the distribution inequalities, how people in the more rural or remote island areas were adversely affected by the lack of mass distribution. So we co-create this distribution strategy, changing it every week, really, and then work also with convenience stores for pre-ordering, for 24 hours pickups of masks and things like that. And our numeric models shows us once that we hit 3/4 of our population wearing medical masks, the R value will be consistently under 1, which is basically a physical vaccine that vaccinates the entire society. And also fun, because COVID is nothing to joke about. But nowadays, because there's a lot of anxiety around the world, conspiracy theories that travels on outrage and fear maybe have a Arnold value of 3. That is to say, each hour, one person share on social media to 3 other people. And our counter disinformation strategy in Taiwan is called humor over rumor. That is to say, to make sure that our science and clarification is so funny that people can't help but laugh about it and share it so that it travels with even higher R value. And to that end, our Minister of Health and Welfare has a participation officer team as with any other ministry. And we have a official spokesdog, the name is Zongchai, a Shiba Inu from that ministry. And so when we introduce, for example, physical distancing, we say if you are indoors, you have to keep 3 Shiba Inus away from one another, or you have to wear a mask. If you're outdoor, keep 2 Shiba Inus away. And remember to cover your mouth and nose when sneezing. Pre-order your mask. But why would you wear a mask? Well, you wear a mask to protect you from your own unwashed hands. And this meme is so hilarious that people just share it regardless of their age group, and it connects hand sanitation and mask use, which are the 2 most important things in the counter coronavirus. And so in this sense, universal health coverage, research, development to affordable first physical, now hopefully biological vaccines enables us to fight communicable diseases. And so this is what Dr. Tsai Ing-wen has mentioned during her first inauguration speech. She's on her 2nd term as president now. She said 4 years ago that in Taiwan, democracy was seen as a showdown, as a trade-off between opposing values, such as, for example, human rights and democracy on one side, and public health and safety, security on the other. But she said, instead of being showdown between opposing values, our democracy must become a conversation between diverse values. So out of different positions, we can find common values, and out of common values, we can innovate using digital technologies, making sure that everybody can realize their different positions with the common values. So I just showed you my office, literally my office. It's at the heart of Taipei City, the Social Innovation Lab. The public art you see here are drawn by people with trisomy differences, Down syndrome people, and they're very creative. People stepping into this place very easily because we tore down all the walls. It's literally a park. So everybody and their dog and their self-driving vehicles can visit me. It's my open office hour every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to the evening. Anyone can talk to me provided that they are okay with their ideas being shared in open innovation manner, that is to say, published on the internet under a Creative Commons license. So it enables the lobbyists to lobby me, but they have always to lobby from a public interest viewpoint because they know the whole society is watching, enables the co-creation, for example, of self-driving vehicles that fits the social norm, that helps the social norm instead of disrupting the social norm. And that, in SDG terms, is encouraging effective partnerships. Every year, we hold a presidential hackathon to highlight such creations so that the social innovators, 200 of them this year, and in partnership with AIT, we promote, for example, the water savior, who are people who build chatbots interactively that enables, because of climate change, we're more and more facing a water shortage issue. So it diagnoses the pipes to find the places that are most likely leaking. And so it automatically cures those pipes and identify the one that require manual intervention to those professional repairs people. And it's, of course, one of the SDGs, target 6.4, because we use SDG as a common index and vocabulary. The people in New Zealand invited the team over, and we co-created the same AI system with the Wellington Water Company. And each winner of the presidential hackathon received a trophy that resembles the shape of Taiwan with a micro projector underneath. And the micro projector, very interestingly, of the trophy, if you turn it on, what it does, well, it projects Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. It projects Dr. Tsai Ing-wen handing you the trophy. So it's a self-describing trophy that carries the presidential promise that whatever you did in the past 3 months will become national policy with all the regulatory personnel and budget that is required to make it happen in the next 12 months. And so that encouraged public sector to work with the private and social sectors on what we call data collaboratives. Again, like a distributed ledger, everybody can add pieces to the puzzle, but nobody can change the numbers that other people have appended to it. This is joint data controllership that is curated by people as young as the primary school. There's many primary school students in Taiwan that learn about data competence and stewardship by air boxes, which are very inexpensive boxes that measure the air quality index like PM2.5 and so on, that contributes to a global ledger, and it enables education for sustainable development and also global citizenship. Again, this is something that in the post-COVID era, because of the international solidarity in tackling a common issue together, we can then also tackle climate change, disinformation crisis, and all those structural issues that are global in nature. And we do the solution in Taiwan with a assistive intelligence plus collective intelligence strategy. And that's our presidential hackathon. The other workforce change that I would like to mention is that even though we never had a lockdown, we did for a couple months place restrictions on large gatherings. So there's a lot of satellite offices, satellite learning, both in lifelong and K-12 education facilities, but also for the public sector as well, for the career public service. For example, this is one of the more rural places in Taiwan. I think it's Hualien and close to Taidong. And I go there and attend their town hall meetings of the people working in social sector there. So when I attend their facilitated meeting, I maybe go there a couple of days before and do an ethnographic or just hanging out with people, sometimes with the help of the indigenous cultural translators, because in Taiwan, we have more than 20 national languages, most of them indigenous, but they connect back to the Social Innovation Lab in Taipei, where the 12 different ministries with section chiefs or higher rank view the conversation from afar and then connect into this co-presence framework, which engenders more trust actually than face-to-face meetings, because when face-to-face, both sides have to wear a mask and you can't see each other's expressions very well. But with very high definition bandwidth and broadband as a human right, anywhere in Taiwan, even on the top of Taiwan, almost 4,000 meters high, we have 10 megabits per second broadband access, unlimited data for just $16 per month. And if you don't, it's my fault, literally. So that enables the social innovation tools to the most remote parts of Taiwan. And the best ideas sometimes just challenges the existing regulations. So we also have a general purpose sandbox system where the municipal area can say, oh, let the innovator, for example, with self-driving vehicles, try to break the regulations for a while. We agree not to fine you for 6 months or so, but in return, you have to disclose whether your experiment worked or not and work with the society to make sure that it actually shares what it learned with the society, and the society decides whether the idea is worth including in the public system. But when I say whether the society accepts the idea, what does that really mean? Who is the society? Well, we use digital technology here too for our public workforce. This is a system named POLIS, which is an assistive intelligence, AI-powered conversation tool that can gauge people's feelings around a common topic. This is from 2015. This shape is a real shape that our conversation had when we had a conversation around Uber X at the time. And people, regardless of whether they're Uber drivers, taxi drivers, Uber passengers, other passengers, so on, can very easily join using their mobile phone to first look at the shared facts, and then using the POLIS system to share their feelings. There's no right or wrong about feelings. And it takes 3 weeks or so for feelings to resonate with one another. And then we meet face to face in the kind of virtual town hall meeting that I just introduced. And the best idea are the ones that take care of most people's feelings. And then we turn them into decisions. Nowadays, Uber is a legally operating taxi fleet called Q Taxi in Taiwan. And our existing taxi fleet has also upgraded to offer the same kind of service that Uber offers. So basically, you can see my contribution here that I think passenger liability insurance is very important. If you agree with me, your avatar will move toward me. If you disagree with me, your avatar will move farther away from me. And then you will see another sentiment from another citizen, which you can then agree or disagree. But there is no reply button, so there is no room for troll to grow. And every time that we run such a POLIS conversation, we run 4 of them using the digital dialogue brand with the AIT Taiwan-US partnership. So it also works in the diplomatic setting. We always see this picture. That is to say, if you look only into institutional and some social media, sometimes they highlight only the divisive statements, those ideological differences that tears the society apart. But actually, using POLIS, because there's no reply button, most people agree with most other people on most of the things, most of the time. And this then enables us to act on what we call the rough consensus, which is what everybody can live with, and to do digital policy making, crowdsourced agenda setting that benefits everybody. And in this way, we develop our KPIs, not as something that is top-down, but essentially crowdsourcing the agenda that measures the development and measures process and progress. And that enables our societal, our business, and the governance and environmental groups to work on common innovations and using digital to further the global goals. Now, in the final few minutes, I would like to share with you my job description, which to me signifies what digital means in my position as the digital minister, which is, of course, the global goals 1718, reliable data, 1717, effective partnerships, 17:6 in the workforce, we do a work out loud way and radically trust the citizen to share our innovation. So my job description goes like this. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it an Internet of beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it a shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, Let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear that a singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister Tong, for your impressive and informative presentation. We'll discuss further with you during our question and answer session. Now we'd like to take a quick break, and we will be back with you very shortly. Okay, welcome back, everyone. For our next speaker, we have Dr. Kamran Khan joining us from Canada. Dr. Khan is an infectious disease physician with training in public health and preventative medicine. He's also an associate professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Toronto.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Focus on human migration, international travel, and the impact of globalization on newly emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases. Last but not least, he's also the founder of a social enterprise called Blue Dot that helps develop innovative web and mobile technologies to facilitate the smart and timely decision by individuals and health organizations. Now let's warmly welcome Dr. Khan coming to us live from Toronto. Dr. Khan?
Okay, thank you very much. I can hear you. I just wanted to check and see if you can hear me and if you can also see my screen.
We can hear you and we can see your screen, sir. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. Well, good evening, at least from Toronto, and good morning, I guess, perhaps depending on where you are. So thank you for having me here this evening. I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the power of data, picking up on the previous conversation and presentation to build resilience to global epidemic threats. Clearly, we are in the midst of a crisis that unlike any we have seen in the last century. But these types of threats, of course, are going to be, unfortunately, something that we see in the future as well. So let me kind of start out by talking a little bit about what we have learned, obviously, during COVID-19, but also if we look back in the last 20 years, at the various epidemics that we have seen, from SARS to the H1N1 pandemic to Zika, chikungunya, Ebola, and others, it's that outbreaks can appear quickly and spread very, very rapidly. And of course, time is our most valuable resource when it comes to getting in front of these types of threats. Thankfully, we do have growing opportunities to be able to move faster than epidemics as we look at growing access to data and diverse sources of data, advanced analytical tools like machine learning and artificial intelligence, as well as digital technologies to be able to spread information and knowledge through the internet faster than an outbreak is capable of spreading. So when we do think of some of those developments, we really have the raw ingredients needed to be able to generate and disseminate insights even faster. But in order to actually realize this opportunity, what we need more advanced epidemic early warning systems that can pick up threats appearing in different parts of the world and anticipate their spread and impacts so that we can mobilize a timely, effective, efficient, coordinated response to those types of threats. So I'm going to just share with you a little bit about Blue Dot. As you heard, I wear a few different hats. I'm a practicing infectious disease physician. I actually got into this space because of my experience during the SARS outbreak in 2003, which was the earliest days, the first few months of my medical career, and watching our city get crippled by this coronavirus. And in fact, seeing colleagues of mine get infected with SARS. So after continuing to work as a clinician, as an academic, and as a professor, I've been studying emerging infectious disease outbreaks for the last 18 years. But 7 years ago, I founded a digital health company called Blue Dot. It really struck me that the problems we're trying to tackle are very complex and require a diverse set of skills. So we are a team of about 70 people. Including physicians specializing in infectious diseases like myself, veterinarians. We know many of these diseases have their origins in animal populations, ecologists, epidemiologists, geographers, engineers, data scientists, software developers, and it's ultimately the confluence of all of these different skill sets that allow us to tackle some of these real significant challenges. Now, I'm going to describe a little bit of what we have been doing. We have been building that early warning system that we wish we had during the SARS outbreak back in 2003. And there are 4 integrated pillars. I'm going to talk briefly about each of the pillars, recognizing this is largely just about a 15-minute presentation. So I'll keep this to a fairly high level and happy to go into a deeper discussion during some of the Q&A session. So obviously, if we're going to respond to outbreaks and emerging threats quickly, we're going to have to be able to detect them quickly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about epidemic surveillance. We also know that epidemics, as I mentioned earlier, will leap across continents in hours or days, and we need to be able to anticipate how they are going to disperse so that we can utilize our resources in the most, our human resources in the most effective and efficient way possible. Now, outbreaks spread around the world all the time. As I mentioned, as a clinician, I see patients who are travelers returning from all around the world with various types of infectious diseases, but those don't all trigger outbreaks, let alone large-scale epidemics or pandemics. So how can we anticipate how certain diseases, when they disperse, which ones may be more prone to cause disruption that we're looking to prevent? And then finally, how do we disseminate knowledge in a way that can empower our key stakeholders, whether they're in government or whether they are in the private sector or in the healthcare sector? Because ultimately, it really takes more than just the whole of government, but rather the whole of society in order to build resilience and respond to these types of threats that we are unfortunately seeing with greater frequency in the past few decades. And of course, this is really just to indicate that all of these pieces have to be integrated. Because outbreaks spread quickly, we have to go from detection to assessment of dispersion and disruption, and then ultimately turn that into knowledge to disseminate. And we need to do that very, very quickly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the first pillar here as it relates to global epidemic surveillance and detection of threats. Here's where our team has been using AI to augment human intelligence and human capacity to give us a more of a bird's eye panoramic view of epidemic threats appearing around the world. Now, news of infectious disease outbreaks and threats can come from a few different channels. On one hand, they can come from official reports. Perhaps the public health agency is reporting an outbreak that may be occurring. Now, unfortunately, all of that information is quite disparate. We've got, countries all around the world that may be reporting this type of information, and our engineers are automating the extraction of all of these reports and alerts and notifications that are coming about. Now, unfortunately, official reports may not always be the most timely. they may be verified, but they may not be as timely, and which is where we use unofficial reports, sometimes referred to as event-based surveillance, to complement the official reports coming from the public health agencies. But of course, that's a vast amount of unstructured text data. We are currently processing this in 65 different languages, looking for over 150 different diseases and syndromes, and doing this around the clock every 15 minutes. Now, to process that vast amount of data, this is where our data scientists and our subject matter experts have worked together to use natural language processing and machine learning to take all of this unstructured text data and to start to bring structure to it so that we can actually see, where the place and the time at which this event is occurring, as well as the pathogen, and in many instances, even gathering contextual data, perhaps around case counts, non-pharmaceutical interventions, and other relevant information. Now, this is something that we use to present to our team of subject matter experts, because while this engine is actually quite accurate, there are contextual factors that need to be considered. That's in some instances, really humans have a better grasp of what the context may mean than a machine would. So this is just one example of how early on in the morning of December 31st, this system picked up some early news of an unusual pneumonia in Wuhan, and you can see some of this here, machine translating it, and then ultimately determining that this was something that would be relevant to present to our team of subject matter experts, which includes physicians, veterinarians, and epidemiologists. Now, this is happening around the clock. It's not just the early days of COVID-19, but this may be measles outbreaks, Lassa fever outbreaks, CCHF, a wide array of other types of outbreaks that may be arising or emerging from naturally occurring causes, maybe accidents or possibly even deliberate acts. Now, the second pillar is around dispersion. So as we know, unfortunately today, we have been largely, commercial air travel has been diminished greatly because of the pandemic. But in 2019, there were over 4 billion passengers boarding commercial flights traveling around the world. And this has become the primary conduit for how people move, but also how infectious diseases of people also can spread. This has been an area of my research for the last 18 years as an academic and as a scientist, is understanding the global airline transportation network as this conduit for the spread of infectious diseases. So I do want to highlight how the platforms that we have built use GIS, or Geographic Information Systems, to be able to connect the location of the outbreak to identify, based on things like the road network and other factors, where the nearby airports are, to automatically connect into the data on all of the commercial flights around the world, their schedules, and even to the anonymized passenger level flight itineraries. As I mentioned, in 2019, that was about 4 billion itineraries, to be able to assess, well, how are populations moving around the planet from that particular geographic location. So this image here is showing the flight paths of nonstop flights to different places around the world, and the circles are the final destinations of those travelers. You can see the largest majority of those travelers are in parts of East Asia. Now, we were sufficiently worried about or concerned about what we were seeing because there were a number of parallels to the SARS epidemic back in 2003 that we also published this, and this is actually the first peer-reviewed scientific publication on COVID-19, actually prior to it having a name. As you can see here, pneumonia of unknown etiology in Wuhan, potential for international spread by commercial air travel. We were sufficiently concerned. There were about 24 cases being reported back on December 31st, but we were concerned that perhaps maybe we were seeing the tip of the iceberg, or perhaps the epidemic may actually grow in size, and where should we be looking next? So we published this here over, you can see on the right-hand side, the red dots are some of the cities that were impacted and had COVID-19 importations fairly early in the course of the epidemic. You'll see places like Bangkok at the top of the list, and Tokyo down at number 3. You'll note that the first country reporting a case of COVID-19 outside of mainland China was Thailand, and I believe the second was Japan. So this is really a way to help us try and anticipate where to look next, so that we can perhaps heighten our surveillance and also anticipate introduction of a pathogen so that we can mobilize a timely response. I just was going to highlight this was something we submitted back on January 8th. It only took us really just a few seconds to generate these analytics, but a few days to speak to the editor and submit this publication. As we know, people are traveling not just through commercial flights, but also are moving through other conveyances by road, train, bus, etc. This article in The Economist was written in 2015, and 2020 seemed like a long ways away at that time. But here we are in 2020, and the vast majority of people in the world have smartphones in their pocket. We have been working anonymously analyzing location data from nearly 400 million mobile devices worldwide, and doing this in a way, sorry, let me just move that off. Oops, let's see what just happened there. Let me go back. Okay, something just happened here to my screen. Let me see if I can, okay, there we go. Can you see my screen now okay? Hopefully you can. Okay, yes, all right. I'll keep, okay, so here what we're looking at are mobile devices that were previously in Wuhan and where they have been over the next 14 days. This is over the month of December. So what you see here is this purple circle is looking at devices, but you'll also see that over the next 14 days, there are other locations like in Tokyo, in Seoul, in Shanghai, in parts of Taiwan, Hong Kong, in Shenzhen, as well as Bangkok. And so these are other types of mechanisms for us to be able to understand dispersion patterns and to do so quickly in near real time. And as COVID-19 started to seed and arrive in different parts of the world, here's some work we were doing with the state of California looking at mobile devices during the stay-at-home orders and the recommendations for people to stay at home. These devices, we were able to, I do want to highlight all of these analytics are following all of the privacy legislations and adherent to all of those privacy laws. What we're doing here is not tracking individuals, but looking at how devices are moving outside of their location between midnight and 6 a.m. to understand if populations are moving outside of their home and where those movements are increasing and where they're perhaps decreasing. So there's a lot of blue here, which means there's less movement than the week before, but you will see some red dots, which highlight some places like grocery stores and parks and a few other places where there was actually more congregation occurring relative to the week previously. So this is a way to help us take a more of a precision approach to understanding where we should be looking and perhaps where some of our finite human resources in public health can be directed. So this is a visualization over a 24-hour period. Finally, I'm just going to say a little bit about the fourth integrated pillar here around disruption. I'll be brief here. I could easily spend an hour just on this topic here alone. But when we think about infectious disease impacts, it really lies at the crossroads of the characteristics of the disease itself, as well as the population characteristics and the environmental conditions. And so this could include things like in terms of the population, age structures, other factors such as immunity, environmental conditions, maybe temperature, climate, the presence of mosquito vector, a wide variety of other conditions. And this is where at Blue Dot we have been gathering not just data on epidemics and disease surveillance, but also looking at commercial air travel, population mobility, and demographics, animal populations as reservoirs for human disease, mosquito vectors, real-time climate data, health system capacity, etc. The last area I'm just going to mention around dissemination. So taking all of this information, turning it into a piece of technology and providing the appropriate content so that we can now disseminate this information and empower those various audiences. So I'm just going to show one piece of technology actually, before I go to the one piece of technology, let me just say something about timing. and timeliness, and why I think this is incredibly important. Today, I think largely we have a bit of a waterfall approach as it relates to intelligence reaching different audiences. So the public health sector, of course, is responsible for taking this panoramic view of infectious disease risk. They're generally the ones that first hear about this, whether it's a CDC or WHO or the public health agency in your particular country. Now, I say this as a healthcare provider who, as I said, just a few hours ago, I was in the emergency department seeing patients. And so I work in the healthcare sector, is we don't tend to find out about this right away because, of course, we've got, I had 40 patients on my list to see today. I didn't have time to be worrying about what's happening halfway around the world. I need to be thinking about what's happening and right in front of me. And so this information, ultimately, we need better systems to bring this right down to the hospital triage, the emergency department, because sick patients don't show up at the public health department. They show up in the emergency department of the hospital. Industry and other branches of government may find out about various threats a little bit later. And then ultimately, in some instances, the public is maybe some of the last to know. What we've always felt is that we need a more contemporaneous approach to be able to engage and have this early warning system supply, the appropriate types of intelligence to government, to industry. So, for example, we work with commercial airlines and other types of private sector organizations that are also really eager to understand what's happening around the world so they can protect their employees, they can protect their customers. And so there's another channel for us to be able to direct these insights to benefit public health. Healthcare providers, as I mentioned, and then healthcare consumers, the general public. So this is broadly the ecosystem in which Blue Dot is operating. I am just going to show here a video of a piece of technology. This is the global dashboard that we have built out to offer that view of what's happening at the panoramic level. This is the manifestation of all of those surveillance analytics that I described on all these various different pathogens, what's happening where around the world, how that's connected to commercial air travel data, so one can understand what risks do I face if I'm in Toronto. That's going to be very different than if I'm in Taipei or in London or in another part of the world. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to fast forward and kind of show how for any of these particular diseases, one can take a look at all of the various reports about, here we're looking at COVID-19 cases day over day. There's also, as you can see on the map over on the right-hand side, a visualization of all of the various airports based on their risk of having cases dispersed into those particular areas as we analyze the movements of travelers around the world. And just showing here, looking not only province by province, but also adjacent states next to the Canadian border. So this is a platform that our partners and users configure to meet their own needs. So if they're based in a particular geographic region of the world, they can configure this application to essentially provide intelligence that's pertinent to them in their location at that particular moment in time. And this is a way that I think can help us not be overwhelmed by the vast amounts of surveillance data that can be out there in the world on any given day. It's really to focus your attention on the things that perhaps are most relevant to you based on your particular interests and the potential for dispersion and subsequently impact. So I'm going to wrap up here, just mindful of time, and highlight the fact that global epidemics are increasing in frequency, scale, and impact. And COVID-19 obviously is a massively disruptive event, completely unprecedented in its disruption. But it also is a moment for us to be looking past this pandemic and thinking about what may lay ahead. As I mentioned, 18 years ago, a coronavirus captured my attention and set me on this path. And here we are 18 years later with another coronavirus. There will be more, regrettably, of these types of threats that we need to be aware of. And some of them may arise from Mother Nature, and some may occur through accidental or deliberate acts. Advanced, early warning systems are needed, and of course, to mitigate against a variety of different types of impacts to our health, our security, economic consequences and social impacts as well, and ultimately really to build lasting resilience against those types of threats. And I think the final point I'd like would perhaps make is that ultimately these types of systems can help us be more timely in our response to threats, effective and efficient, and better coordinated to threats. And ultimately, it will not be sufficient, in my opinion, for us to be able to simply try and tackle these threats through government or through industry alone or through academia or civil society. Ultimately, we're going to need to be empowering the whole of society with these types of insights in order to mitigate the risks that we inevitably face looking forward. So I think I am going to stop my presentation here. And perhaps I will turn it back to turn it back over to you for any questions, or I believe perhaps the next speaker. So I think I'm on time, 9:05, so I'm about 1 minute over.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Khan. That was a really impressive presentation, and we look forward to discussing further with you later during the question and answer session. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're very sorry for the technical difficulty, but in the meantime, we're going to move on to our question and answer session. And today, these have been really great presentations, and we've had over 200 people from 25 countries join. So we're looking forward to your questions. Without further ado, let's get to those questions. For the first one, we've seen Shirley Aguilar from Guatemala raise her hand. Ms. Aguilar, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. Buenas noches a todos.
Buenas noches.
I'm the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from Guatemala. It is a great privilege for me to give you a warm welcome to this virtual conference that has been organized by the alliance between Taiwan, Japan, United States, and Guatemala. I think the digital economy is presented as a new form of production and consumption and help people too. It is a complex process that involves changes in the social, economic, and political organization of the countries. And today we'll learn about can the Latin American countries take advantage of these trends to achieve development. I just want to thank you very much to all the speakers for having brought the extraordinary insights to Guatemala and Latin America. I really appreciate, and I want to thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. We now see another hand up from Paraguay. Mr. Sebastian Garcia, can you hear us, sir? Mr. Garcia from Paraguay, did you have a question or want to share some thoughts with the group?
No, in this moment, no.
Hello, Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, please, the floor is yours.
Lo diré en español, mucho gusto, buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Edwin García. Estoy acá trabajando en los temas de economía de la salud en Guatemala y en este momento trabajando las estadísticas de la seguridad social. Mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto. Do you okay, thank you, sir. And we have another question from Michael Singh from Belize. Mr. Singh from Belize, can you hear us? Can you please let us know your question?
Yes. Hi. First of all, thank you very much for the invite to the event. It's been very eye-opening. I think the presentations so far have been extremely advanced and showing us what is possible using digitization. I wanted to make a comment as someone who's leading the digital transformation agenda in Belize. My role with the Office of the Prime Minister is to lead the digital transformation of government and to integrate with the private sector on our experiences and our efforts. What we find, though, is that there are many basic pillars that are needed to enable the use of technology for government, commerce, education, research, especially now in the environment we're in. We find that COVID has brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. For example, digital inclusion is improving rapidly, the use of the internet, but we find financial inclusion to be very low. My question really is throughout the discussion, if there's ways of giving small countries, developing countries like ours, some advice on how to resolve some of these structural issues as we start moving towards greater digitization. And of course, I'd like to thank the government of Taiwan for all the assistance that they have given us in that respect. There has been so much collaboration through all the agencies, including ICDF, many of the other Taiwan agencies that we've collaborated with that has helped us to move forward our digital agenda. We really appreciate that assistance. We appreciate the assistance through the US government on some of the initiatives that we've been working on, particularly in respect to open governance, which is an important pillar for us to move the digital agenda forward. So I'd like to thank everyone for having us here today, and I look forward to the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Minister Tong,
Sure. Is it possible to show my tablet again? Yes. So yeah, just a few things about our digital initiative. When I first became digital minister, I helped defining the DIGI or DigiPlus plan that informs Taiwan's digital strategy. And DIGI is very easy to remember as digitization, innovation, governance, and inclusion. And these are the 4 pillars of Taiwan's digital strategy. So just share some small tips like my initial moves when the DigiPlus plan first started. For the first part, digitization, we made sure that we are making ourselves free from vendor lock-in, which is especially an issue for developing economies. We not only mandated our open data license compatible with the open definition worldwide, and also make the real-time open data, that is to say open API, a national standard, even before the Linux Foundation ratified the open API standard, but it's the same standard, which is translated to Mandarin. And so in our procurement, if a vendor makes something that is accessible to human beings, but they don't make it machine readable and writable, then they could be disqualified for being unprofessional and discriminate against robots. Well, we don't quite say that, but it's the idea. And that enables all our backend system to be adaptable and vendor neutral so that other people working on chatbots, virtual reality, and whatever can work with existing open innovations on top of that open API. That's the digitization part. For the innovation part, we make broad use of the Sustainable Development Goals so that our social innovation platform, if you work on health, if you work on circular economy, if you work on open governance and so on, you can read the voluntary local reports and also the local social innovation organizations that focus on these issues to form coalitions broadly and very quickly. And so for the governance part, we also partner with, for example, the Transparency Initiative cost and the open contracting partnerships and so on. In our presidential hackathon last year, one of the 2 winners was from Honduras, and they work on the CSOX database that enable environmental planning in the very early beginnings of each and every procurement project about land development and so on, to enable cross-sectoral governance that gives better legitimacy for digital tools. And finally, the inclusion part, we specifically empower people disenfranchised. For example, very young people who don't have the power to vote can nevertheless become our reverse mentors to the cabinet and become the youth advisors to propose, for example, that our world skills champions and so on go to the National Day parade alongside the athletes. And that gives the people who focus on digital skills a status of national heroes like athletes. And that promotes our skilled education and vocational education as well. And that is the power of inclusion of very young people into your cabinet, essentially as reverse mentors.
Thank you so much, Minister Tong. We have another question also from Paraguay, Mr. Jose Pino from Paraguay. Do we have you still, Mr. Pino?
Hello, hello, Patrick. Hello, Audrey. Do you listen to me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, perfect. I am Jose Pino from Paraguay. I work here as a director of online service at the Ministry of ICT, Information and Communications Technology. Also, I'm working with the Ministry of Health. We have an application, like a mobile and web application, to track the citizens about the health status and the localizations. Also, we are working with the team from Taiwan to expand his health information system here in Paraguay. So they are a great team also. They are working here in the country. And I have a lot of questions, but I want to read some of these questions because I was working with the guys from the development team, and we launched this COVID-19 app like in March, because the first case in Paraguay was reported in March, like 7th of March, one of the earlier days in March. So we started to develop an application. So where we can have more information about this kind of technologies, because when we started to develop, we also talked with the guys from Taiwan, from the health information system that we are developing here, and they told us that they are using like a tracking platform to track the citizens and to track the health status of the citizens. And now we have our application in GitHub, like we have open the source code to build a community around that. So now we're trying to build the community and to do the things in terms of open and social, to try to innovate. Also, I'm leading the GovLab here, the Government Innovation Lab. We are in the early stage in about that. So if you have an experience to share with us, it will be great, because we are in the very, very early stage. And this is very interesting, what you show us, Audrey. And where we can have more information about the social innovation platform is a web page, I think. And do you have a website so I can read about that and share with the team? And also I have another questions to the other speaker. I think it's Cameron Khan from Toronto. I saw in his presentation that he has like a 40 million million of devices. I'm not sure, 400 million of devices. And I want to know how they did that, in terms of they speak with the telcos, with the telephone companies, or they have like this contact tracing app from Apple and Google, how they work with to have this data about for example, the spread or the moving, how these devices are moving. And also if they have, I want to ask if they have data from Paraguay, from Latin America, because I saw in that web page, in that web admin panel, or in that dashboard, I saw that they have data from the US, but I want to know if they have data around the world. If it's possible to see more about that, because I think it's very interesting to learn about that experience. So I don't want to extend more, but I'm really open to know about this experience.
Sure. First, let's turn to Minister Tang, and then we'll
please show my slides, please. So the social innovation portal, very easy to remember, is just si.taiwan.gov.tw. And in similar vein, if you want to read about our AI strategy, it's ai.taiwan.gov.tw. The civil IoT would be ci.taiwan.gov.tw. The biomedical plan, bio.taiwan.gov.tw, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Minister Tang. And then I'd like to turn the second question over to Dr. Khan, and also add an additional question that we had that's related from Carlos Murillo. He said, and similarly, how can we prepare for the next pandemic in the next decade? Dr. Khan?
Okay, thank you. So maybe I'll start with Jose's questions. I think one of the points that he was referring to was around mobile data analytics and trying to understand population mobility. We have been working with a number of organizations that gather location data through mobile apps, such as the GPS location, and also working with telcos that are providing that generate data that is ultimately connecting to the mobile towers themselves and using geolocation through that particular mechanism. So globally, and there are trade-offs. So GPS data can actually move across international borders. Generally, cellular data is usually restricted from within the country. There's different benefits and drawbacks in terms of spatial precision and temporal precision of the data and various types of use cases. So we actually, prior to COVID-19, at Blue Dot, we've been actually studying mobile data analytics for more than a year leading up to this, reviewing all of the scientific literature, working with these various data to get to better understand what their strengths and limitations and so forth are, so that we, in a real world situation, we wouldn't be looking at the data from scratch. Also to set up the systems to be able to analyze these data, because they're quite large. Look, volume, with supercomputing and cloud computing, we can certainly manage this, but to actually analyze the data very quickly required us to set up some of those types of processes. So I would say if there is an interest, and actually a lot of the data we have is global in scope, the representation is greater in certain parts of the world. But if there is an interest in exploring mobile data and population mobility data in Latin America, I do believe I put my email address at the end of the presentation. It's just Cameron@bluedot.global. You can send me an email and I can forward it on to our team if you'd like to have that discussion. I'll move on, perhaps in the interest of time, to the second question, which was a bit more about how do we prepare for the next threat. Well, I think, when I, as a public health physician, I also think about, primary prevention and secondary and tertiary prevention. So the work that we're doing at Blue Dot really fits squarely into early warnings or secondary prevention. And as we know, we can't just be looking for one particular type of disease. And this is why we've been using machine learning and natural language processing, other types of analytical techniques to be able to try and complement official reports of infectious disease threats with informal and unverified information. Now, of course, we have to caveat that information so that users can understand, where does the data come from, and how to make the appropriate decisions based on the level of confidence in the data. Because, again, as I said, much of the earlier surveillance data is not necessarily verified. We find, on average, a lot of the outbreaks that we pick up through our system may come as early as 40 days before they are officially reported through public health channels. But I think more broadly, it's not enough to be able to just pick up news of an outbreak. One has to understand, be able to anticipate patterns of dispersion, impact, and then I think perhaps one of the key things I feel is incredibly important is to make sure that those insights are reaching the right audiences in a way that is consumable. So I live both on the public health side as well as on the healthcare side. That word health is in both of those two different sectors, but they are very, very different communities, and how they consume and understand information is also quite different. So I think, there's a much broader strategy about readiness for the next set of global threats, but ultimately it really boils down to use of better data and analytics and communication of this information to key stakeholders in a timely fashion. As I said earlier in the presentation, these diseases and outbreaks spread incredibly quickly, and our only way of being able to mitigate their consequences is we're going to have to move faster and smarter and better coordinated. So let me turn it back over to you.
音は聞こえます？マイク。
Thank you very much, Dr. Khan.
マイクは聞こえない。
Okay, just one more question. I think we might have Watabe-san on the line.
じゃあこれもうこのままにしておきます。はい。
Just one quick question that I've seen several questions come in about this question, and perhaps it's for both Dr. Khan and Mr. Tong, but in situations where there might be lower literacy rates or not as much availability of schooling, how do you balance the rush towards enacting the most advanced technological skills with trying to make that communicable to a population that might not have access to the technology or ability to consume it, as you just said, Dr. Khan? Maybe first.
Sure. Right, since I was like maybe 12 years old when the internet first became generally available for Taiwanese population, we always have this idea of internet as a human right. Nowadays, of course, it's broadband as a human right. But we specifically work with the telcos so that, for example, when they bid on the latest 5G bid, there's a very large sum of extra money that they have to put into the spectrum bid, and we specifically designate those money for the under-resourced places so that for healthcare, for education, and other public utilities, there is like no difference between the most rural and the most urban areas. Actually, the most rural areas are perhaps most advanced because they need more self-driving vehicles and self-driving ships. And so that said, I think one very important thing is just to make sure that we frame the K-12 curriculum not as literacy, which is about people as consumers of data and media, but of competence, which is of them as producers of media and of data. Because if you use a competence-based framework, then they will become citizens who can co-create your most advanced solutions in an open innovation manner. But if this is about only literacy, then of course you will suffer from vendor lock-in from very large international technology companies.
Thank you. Dr. Khan, do you have any other thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I'll just be fairly brief. I think just picking up on Minister Tang's comments here, I think the key really ultimately is that different audiences have different sets of needs. And so I'm going to be speaking more holistically than perhaps the health consumer, but ultimately really understanding who the target audience is. We've learned even within government between the security and law enforcement community and the health community, the language, the terminology is even different. So I think it has actually taken us quite some time to become accustomed to some of the terminology and language. I think the key thing is really from a user perspective is understanding your audience, understanding, how they think about the problems, the language that they use. And I think one of the areas we've been doing a lot of work in is bridging this to the healthcare sector, in part because I kind of live and operate in that sector. And that is for many reasons, because it's such a key point of vulnerability today, which is how does that first patient show up to the emergency department? Do they infect a healthcare worker, as I saw, firsthand in 2003? Does that trigger an outbreak that affects the hospital, the healthcare workers, and even the community? So I think really we have a group and a team of health communications experts and people who think a lot, obviously, about user experience and user design and product to make sure that we're making the information as accessible and consumable for the target audience. So it's a huge issue and a hugely important issue, but I think what I would largely say is just starting with understanding your user and making sure that you're targeting your communications and to them in a way that is meaningful and actionable to them.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Khan. And I think that now we actually have Mr. Watanabe back on the line. So without further ado, we'd like to turn over the floor for his presentation from Tokyo. Mr. Watanabe, welcome.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry for my system trouble. Good morning. I'm Shoji Watanabe from Office of COVID-19 Response, the Cabinet Secretariat. Thank you for making this opportunity today. First of all, I can hear two great presentations. Though my system trouble, I can hear the two great presentations. I'm very impressed. I can find a lot of hint or productive idea. Today, I want to introduce Japanese current situation and policies, and also a new approach. Please look at slide 2. Please look at slide 2. Thank you. This is a table of today's contents. At first, I would like to show you Japanese current situation of infection. Second, I will explain Japanese policies and measures. Third, I want to explain Japanese policies and measures. Third, I want to introduce a Japanese new R&D project using artificial intelligence and other new technologies for the COVID-19 response. Please look at slide 3. First of all, Japanese current situation. This graph shows the number of infected persons reported daily. The number of infected persons decreased in May and June after the state of emergency lifted. But it has increased again in July. A significant number of infections in July have been traced back to nightlife entertainment business, including bars, host and hostess clubs, and other similar places where people are in close contact with each other. The number of infected persons looks calm down in August. Please look at page 4, slide 4. This graph shows the number of deaths reported daily. Although the number of infected persons in summer is bigger than that in April, the number of deaths is smaller than that in April. So the current situation is quite different from that in April. Experts are discussing the reasons. One of the reasons is that about 70% of infected persons in this summer are young people in their 20s or 30s. In Japan, young people tend to not become severe case. Another reason they say is that hospitals and clinics get the know-how and data through the experience of this half year. And the clinical protocol has been improved. But I'm not sure it is true or not. Okay. Related to this point, we have to remember that the infected young person could spread the disease at home to their older family members, who may be much more vulnerable. So please look at page slide 5. Okay. This graph shows the number of daily PCR testing. Japan has expanded testing capacities. In addition to expansion of PCR tests, antigen tests are available. They now have the same approximate accuracy as PCR tests. The results are available after a short time, and the tests are covered by health insurance. It is possible to perform antigen tests by saliva samples. It makes the test easier and less risky for both patients and medical staffs. Please look at page 6. I will introduce Japanese policies and measures. At first, Japan has been encouraging the public to avoid the situation to create clusters, namely the 3 C's: closed space, crowded places, and close contact. While it is still necessary to maintain strict measures to control the spread of the virus, it is important to allow social and economic activity to resume. It is allowed to have stadium events with necessary prevention measures for up to 5,000 spectators, or the half of the capacity of the stadium. whichever number is smaller. We also continue to encourage the public to do such actions as hand washing, wearing masks, using disinfectant to clean the surface of the table or doors, and proper ventilation. 161 industrial sectors developed the guidelines to prevent the infection, and they make an effort to honor them. Please look at slide 7. Japan has been taking a science-based approach. One of the features of Japanese measures is contact tracing, named retrospective contact tracing. Recognizing the nature of the virus, which spreads mainly through clusters, we have utilized the method of retrospective contact tracing. When an infectious case is identified, and we got to know the cluster. In the standard method, contact tracing is done to determine who a person has been in contact with after being infected. But in the case of COVID-19, only about 1 person in 5 is contagious. So it makes more sense to track when they have been in contact with prior to being infected. This has enabled us to identify infection clusters, the common source of infection, which has been extremely variable in limiting the spread of the disease. Please look at slide 8. Another Japanese measure is contact confirming application named COCOA. I know that many countries begin to introduce similar systems. Japan is adopting iPhone OS and Android OS based application software. Users download and install the application software from the website of Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare to their smartphones after their consent. COCOA does not collect users' personal data, contact information, location information, and other information that could identify the individuals are not recorded. By using Bluetooth, possibility of contact within 1 meter for 15 minutes or more is recorded. Information about the contact uses random calls, and it is recorded within the device only. The calls are disabled after 14 days. And if a user becomes tested positive, an operation number is sent to the infected person from the National Health Center. And he or she registers the operation number to the COCOA server. And after the COCOA server confirms the operation number is not a mistake, the COCOA server notified the smartphones which have the possibility of contact. And the COCOA server also sends the smartphones guidance for care and contact information of the public health center. The notified users can have PCR testing in free of charge. The number of the download of COCOA is over 16 million. The number of registrations to COCOA by PCR positive is over 600. However, the 16 million is still small number considering the total number of the smartphone in Japan, which is set up over 60 million. So when we want to enforce the promotion, one of our problem is that young people tend to not install this application, who have confidence in their health. Please look at slide 9. From here, I want to introduce Japanese new approach R&D project using AI, simulation, and other new technologies for planning or making of COVID-19 response. This project has just started since last month. In this project, data is scientifically analyzed by AI and high-performance computer. Of course, simulation is not almighty, but it will provide valuable suggestions. There are 5 R&D fields in this project. These are gray 5 box. And first of all, first field is the simulation to prevent infection. For example, the evaluation of effect of seat arrangement, air conditioning of public transportation, ventilation of event venue, and so on. Japanese National Laboratory RIKEN and some universities participate. Second field is the R&D utilize ICT to prevent the spread of infection. One idea is an automatic detection of congestion level or automatic detection of mask use by image recognition technology. Another example is the early detection of the symptom of severe cases by remote monitoring of the mild cases using vital sensor with wireless devices. These technologies will contribute to decrease the contact between the infected person and their family or medical staffs. Some ICT companies and startup companies and some universities will participate in this R&D. Third field is R&D on systematic inspection and treatment and standardization of inspection method and so on. For instance, simulation to optimize the effective and efficient allocation of medical resources such as consultation and inspection points, isolation facilities, hospitals, and professional staffs. Some universities and research institutes will promote this R&D. Fourth field is simulation of infected expansion. There are several models to simulate the infection spread, such as SIR model, agent-based model. We will promote the several studies currently. We expect that we can also simulate and evaluate the impact of the measures, such as restriction of moving. National Research Laboratories, AIST, this is a National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology, and some universities and research institute will try. This field is the preemptive research such as early detection. For instance, early diagnosis method by CT scan image analysis using artificial intelligence. Bioinformatics, another example is that bioinformatics research such as prediction of protein dynamic structure of virus surface and effect of mutation by molecular dynamic calculation using supercomputing. National Laboratory RIKEN and some universities will join this project. In this project, we will acquire and utilize a lot of data. We want to make these data open to domestic and foreign researchers as possible as we can. We want to promote the studies in these fields. It has passed only 1 month since the project started. However, I will show you some tentative results, especially from first and fourth field. For example, by a National Laboratory RIKEN and on field 1, and one example by National Laboratory AIST on field 4. Please look at slide 10. This slide is an example of a computer simulation using supercomputer Fugaku. the effect of masks and face shield, dispersal of droplets and small particles by cough in the case of wearing masks and in the case of taking a face shield is calculated. On this graph, the right side is bigger sized particle, and blue color means the particle released from the gap, and red color means the particle detected by the mask or face shield. In the case of using face shield, most of the small particles are released from the gap. So ventilation or other methods are necessary when face shields are used. Please look at slide 11. This slide shows the influence of humidity calculated by a supercomputer. In Japan, most of clusters have been found in office and restaurants, except the nightlife entertainment. This study simulates the situation of office or restaurant. Dispersal of droplets and small particles by cough in the case of 30% of in the 30% and 90% of humidity is calculated. In the case of humidity 19%, most of large droplets, the red color is the particle radius over 10 micrometer, drop on the table. In the case of humidity 30%, droplets evaporate rapidly and become small particles and float the air. Please look at slide 12. This slide shows the effect of the partition calculated by a supercomputer. As I said, in Japan, there are clusters in office and restaurants. This study simulates such a scene. Dispersal of aerosols by a curve is calculated. In the case of 1.2 meter partition, 1.2 meter is the height from the ground. Aerosol arrived at the front person in the second, in 30 seconds. And in the case of 1.4 meter partition, aerosol can almost be blocked. Okay, please see next page, slide 13. This slide shows the effect of opening windows in a commuter train. First, the train is filled with aerosols, and how they decrease is calculated in the case of vacant train and a crowded train. These pictures shows 160 seconds after opening windows. We can easily find the effect of opening windows. Recently, I see experiment to measure the carbon dioxide concentration in the vehicle. If the carbon dioxide concentration correlated with quantity of aerosol, we can know the quantity of aerosol by monitoring carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide sensor is not expensive, and carbon dioxide concentration can be measured easily. Please look at slide 14. This is the last example. Last example is the simulation of infected expansion by AIST. The spread of infection is by agent model using GPS data of 5 million persons. The effect of restriction moving and reduction of infection rate are also calculated. Infection rate is a probability that one non-infected person gets contact with one infected person and comes into infected in a certain period of time. We think that we can lower the infection rate by wearing masks or avoiding 3Cs. The peak of infection is delayed. Restriction of moving has the effects to lower the peak. As I said, simulation is not almighty, but it will provide a useful suggestion. Please look at slide 15. Today, I introduced some examples of our R&D project. This project has just started. I hope that more data will be utilized and more studies that matched practical needs will be promoted in the near future. By these challenges, the results of this project will be used for planning or making a COVID-19 response. For example, the improvement of some guidelines or rules or manners. Okay, thank you very much. And the last slide is only the introduction. Japanese government's novel coronavirus task force published planned measures for the coronavirus, August 28. If you have concern, please look at the other website. And I'm sorry for my system trouble.
No problem. Thank you so much, Mr. Watanabe. That was a great presentation. We're coming to the end of our time together, but we had one last question for Dr. Khan, if you're still with us, sir. This last one is just about a question of how can countries where the majority of the population does not have a good internet connection and can't download applications due to costs, deal with the situation. I think Mr. Watanabe showed the situation in Japan, and Mr. Tang talked about Taiwan. Both are well-connected internet societies, but you could just briefly talk about that. We'd appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Thanks very much. And again, appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this really important discussion this evening. I'll say that we have been working in partnership with Global Affairs Canada through the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN countries. As you know, they're quite heterogeneous. Some countries, such as Singapore, are much more advanced with respect to digital infrastructure. Others, Myanmar and Cambodia and others, perhaps maybe not quite as advanced. The approach that we have taken thus far is not requiring the country that we're partnering with to actually be hosting all of the data, to have all of the, to set up all of the infrastructure. In many instances, perhaps, as you said, the infrastructure is not there. Maybe the actual technical skill sets and so forth may not be as widely available. And so in those instances, largely we've partnered by actually being more of an enabler, using things like cloud computing and other mechanisms to be able to actually stitch data together, to kind of connect the dots between data that offers us a global panoramic perspective of what's happening around the planet, but also to be able to couple it with important pieces of domestic data about things like healthcare resources and other important factors. So there's no question that it poses a bit more of a challenge, but I think there are still ways to support countries and enable them to leapfrog ahead by perhaps partnering with other organizations. And again, this is not a plug for for a private sector organization. As I said, I sort of sit in a few different worlds between the healthcare sector, private sector, and academia. But I do think that is very important, because the problems we're tackling will not likely be solved alone by government, whether advanced or not, or alone by academia, or alone by industry. This is really a cross-sectoral problem. And I do think that there are ways to come up with creative solutions on how to overcome some of the technical barriers. But I don't, as I said, we have had about 5 or 6 years now of experience working in a number of more resource limited environments. And there are some challenges, but certainly there are creative ways to overcome and address them. So maybe on that note, I don't want to go too far since I know we're at the top of the hour, but hopefully that was a little bit of a flavor of how we can address some of those types of barriers.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Dr. Khan. And thank you also to all of our speakers here today, Minister Tang, Mr. Watanabe, all of our VIPs at the top of the hour as well. And so, we really appreciate everyone's presentation today. This was the first time we've done this. We hope to do it again, and we really can't wait till we can do it in person. We apologize for any technical difficulties, but thank you all for your patience. And with that, we will turn it over to the AIT Director, Brent Christensen, to offer some closing remarks. And good evening and good morning to you all.
Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Chung, Vice Minister Cao, Chief Representative Izumi, Honorable Guatemala partners, distinguished panelists, virtual guests, ladies and gentlemen, Zhaoan, good evening and buenas tardes. It is my pleasure to offer closing remarks on the occasion of the first in a series of Western Hemisphere-focused Global Cooperation and Training Framework webinars. AIT is hosting, in collaboration with Taiwan, the Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association, and Guatemala. This webinar is a historic event, the first time we are holding an event under the GCTF framework aimed at helping Taiwan share its expertise with countries in the Western Hemisphere. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar as much as I did. I am confident that this series of webinars will bring expertise and knowledge to practitioners across the Western Hemisphere. The GCTF and this webinar further reinforce Taiwan's value as a partner and as a player on the global stage. We are especially grateful for the leadership of Guatemala that has made this possible. The GCTF is a great way to strengthen connections between experts in different countries as they tackle 21st century problems that do not respect borders. Today's panelists reviewed important and timely topics related to the digital economy and COVID-19. Taiwan has received global praise for its effective prevention of COVID-19's transmission, having confirmed just 480 cases with minimal community spread in a population of 23 million people. The now world-famous Taiwan model has been praised not only because of its unparalleled health outcomes, but also because of its foundation in democratic principles, most of all, transparency. As we heard today, the Taiwan model is also uniquely innovative, incorporating an impressive array of technology applications. When cases of COVID-19 are confirmed, Taiwan authorities using cell phone networks can identify and contact those who may have been exposed. Taiwan has also used digital technology to help ensure the rational distribution of face masks and other essential supplies in a democratically responsive and efficient manner. As the pandemic continues to rage across the world, Taiwan can help develop new solutions to support frontline medical and other essential workers. Taiwan set the standard for transparency by quickly and accurately communicating risks to the general public in a way that built trust and secured voluntary cooperation. The whole world has much to learn from Taiwan's example. Though Taiwan is prevented from participating meaningfully in the WHO, the webinar you heard today is just one of the many ways that Taiwan is sharing its expertise and showcasing that it is a force for good in the international community. The United States remains committed to expanding Taiwan's international space. Taiwan has demonstrated time and again that it is a reliable partner and a force for good in the world. We often describe the U.S.-Taiwan relationship as real friends, real progress. And I would like to take this opportunity to encourage all of our partners in the Western Hemisphere to continue to expand their own relationships with Taiwan, since I think we can all agree that Taiwan can help. Thank you for your participation. Gracias and buenas tardes.